I was explaining about the sorrowful desert experience of Chavara Kuriakos Elias. It is here young Kuriakos had his Abba experience. In his heart, he heard Jesus telling, "You are my beloved son." As you know, he was locked inside a room. There, in the silence of his heart, he called back Jesus, "My beloved Father, my Abba." He gave up all his belongings and set out for a journey like Jesus, the Messiah. When you watch the documentary film directed by Father James M.L. CMI, The Footprints of a Saint, it is very powerfully shown how Chavara used to walk swiftly. The film shows Chavara always moved with fastness and passion. As Jesus went around the villages and cities, Saint Chavara went around his communities without looking any caste and creed, poor or rich, dignified or undignified. He reached every field of human situations and brought out new solutions, inventions, and developments in the church and in the society. One of the most powerful aspect which we see in Jesus is his dwelling in the silence. As we have heard from St. Mark's Gospel, chapter 1:35, long before the daylight, Jesus got up and left the house. He went out to a lonely place where he prayed. Jesus was listening to his Father and sharing to his Father. As a result, he spoke to the people what God wanted to speak to them. His silent prayer was the moments of enlightenment. The treasure of his silence enabled Jesus to narrate parables and metaphors. He said, "Look at the lilies of the field. Look at the birds of the air. They do not plant seeds, gather a harvest, and put it in barns. Yet, Father in heaven takes care of them. Aren't you worth much more than birds?" Yes. From the finite, Jesus took us to the infinite. Khalil Gibran says, "Unless you drink from the river of silence, you will not be able to sing beautiful songs in your life." Unless you drink from the river of silence, you will not be able to sing beautiful songs in your life. Jesus drank from the river of silence and came out as a Messiah. Sri Buddha drank from the river of silence, sitting under the Bodhi tree, and became an instrument of enlightenment. Francis of Assisi drank from the river of silence, and he refounded the church. Saint Chavara truly drank from the river of silence, and because of that, he could write enormous amount of spiritual prose and poems, imageries and metaphors. Only a person who dwells in the deep silence can write such lines as Ennude sneham niye പ്രാണനും എനിക്കു നീ നീയല്ലാതെനിക്കൊരു സൗഭാഗ്യം വേറെയില്ല. You are my love. You are the very life. And without you, there is no other profit in me. Mamaka tadan niye bhagyavum yenikku nee ninnilan vishwasam njan അർപ്പിച്ചിടുന്നു മൂദാ. God, you are my Father. You are my most glorious fortune. In you I offer all my faith. I strongly believe it is this inner silence gave the strength to Chavara to engage himself in so many apostolates and ministries like that of Jesus of Nazareth. Mother Teresa once said, "मौन का फल है प्रार्थना, प्रार्थना का फल है विश्वास, विश्वास का फल है सेवा, और सेवा का फल है आनंद." The fruit of silence is prayer, and the fruit of prayer is faith. The fruit of faith is service, and the fruit of service is the inner bliss, inner joy or happiness. Inner silence is the source of intuition. This inner silence, inner stillness is very important if we want to know ourselves and grow spiritually and work for God's people. This is the reason why in all the religious congregations they scheduled time for silence. Unfortunately, the students' information are afraid of silence. When the timetable tells about great silence, they would prefer to go to their friend's room for discussions. Indeed, many are afraid of silence. We cannot buy silence. We have to allow our mind to enter into the depth of our being. But remember, silence is the most creative time. In the modern times, we call it incubation period. The scientific theory of Wallace says that behind any production, invention, or creativity, we need the heat of incubation. At this time, the 15 billion neurons engage in creating variety of answers to our mind, to our consciousness, and at a least expected time there comes the enlightenment, like that of Eureka, Eureka of Archimedes of Syracuse. The proper invention, insight, answer for our questions we get after incubation, after long period of silence. Very often when we speak of silence, many feel that it is useless and boring, impractical and fruitless. But then, why? Every religious community emphasizes the important role of the silence. Because the wise people understand that the silence is the key to wisdom and personal enlightenment. I will not say that the enlightenment is the result of pranayama or hatha yoga or pratyahara, withdrawal of senses. I would rather say, in the silence, our inner self start swimming in the ocean of universal self. We start breathing from the divine self. As our finite consciousness connects to the invisible God in silence, the power of life and energy fills our humble human soul, and we experience a transcendence. We experience the very spark of the divine within us. Silence is a vehicle that takes us close to the divine. The divine is a holy silence. When our finite silence awakens us to communicate with the infinite silence, then of course we are charged with inner blissfulness and serenity. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." In the silence of our inner self, we recognize God and we surrender totally to God. We can recognize God only through the silence. Jesus, God's Son, was recognizing his Father in silence. So he made use of silence every day. All his activities were coming out from this deep prayer in silence. In fact, the inner silence is the mother of all creativity, the source of intuition, and the storehouse of divine energy. And we all have it within us if we remove the lid of our hearts.